Welcome back to Huckabee. This is our special Republican presidential forum. And joining us now is former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Governor, it's good to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
And I'm going to turn you over to Scott Pruitt for the first question of the evening.
Governor, good evening.
Hi, Scott, and thank you, by the way, to you and to Pam and Ken for participating in this. It's been an interesting show to watch so far. I hope it stays that way.
Well, Governor, you've traveled to Oklahoma, and you know that Oklahoma is a leader in energy, from oil and gas to coal to wind. So when energy CEOs tell me that your EPA or your EPA administrator may not be much different than the president's now, what do you say to that?
Well, they don't know what I would do if I were the President of the United States. You know, one of my good friends is Mike Leavitt, who was the EPA administrator under George W. Bush. And I've asked some of the oil and gas company executives, what was it like under Mike Leavitt? And they said it was a whole lot better than it is today. I think the EPA has gotten completely out of control for a very simple reason. It is a tool in the hands of the President to crush the private enterprise system, to crush our ability to have energy, whether it's oil, gas, coal, nuclear. There's a real effort on the part of some in the President's party that don't like the American enterprise system and are trying to find a way to do everything they can to impede the growth of our economy and our energy independence. And I look at the effort on the EPA, for instance, to step in the way of fracking and to eliminate the potential in some states to have our access to natural gas and to oil, and say, look, this is all an effort to say, let's just go solar and wind, and let's raise the cost of energy dramatically. That's, in my view, it's just entirely opposite of the view that we need to have a federal government that sees its job as helping the private sector grow and thrive and add jobs.
Well, Governor, you mentioned hydraulic fracturing. Yeah. And you know that that's revolutionized the natural gas industry as far as extracting natural gas. The states have primacy in that area right now from a regulation standpoint. The current EPA administrator is marching toward having the federal government oversee hydraulic fracturing. Yeah, would you put a stop to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the EPA and those extreme voices in the environmental community and in the President's own party are just frustrated beyond belief that the states have the regulatory authority over fracking. And right now, I guess something close to 70% of the oil wells in this country have been fracked. So the states have been managing this, managed it well, but the EPA wants to be able to get in and grab more power and basically try and move the whole economy away from oil, gas, coal, nuclear, and push it into the renewables. Look, we all like the renewables, but renewables alone are not going to power this economy. And yeah, I would, among other things, I would get the EPA out of its effort to manage carbon dioxide emissions from automobiles and trucks. Look, that was not a pollutant within the meaning of the legislation that authorized the EPA. It is, of all the agencies in Washington, it is the one most being used by this president to try and hold down, crush, and insert the federal government into the life of the private sector.
Governor, in a general election debate, President Obama will say that his health care law was based on your Massachusetts model. What would be your response to the president in that debate?
I sure look forward to that, because I'll say, Mr. President, thank you for the compliment, but why didn't you give me a call? Why didn't you pick up the phone and ask me what I'd do differently, what I'd do the same? Why didn't you ask me what the flaws were in the Massachusetts plan?
What would you do differently?
Oh, a lot of things. Actually, the bill that I proposed was different than the final bill. Some measures in the final bill I vetoed. They were overridden by the legislature. And actually, I'm sure that in the years that have passed, some things have been seen to have gone well. Some things needed to be adjusted and improved. So, do I like the bill overall? Yes. Am I proud of what we did for our state? Yes. But what the president has done is way beyond what we envisioned. We were trying to take care of the 8% of our population that didn't have insurance. The president is not just worried about the people without insurance. Obamacare is about taking over 100% of the people's insurance in this country.
But you would acknowledge, you would agree, wouldn't you, that even when you were trying to take care of that 8%, what you did in that bill in Massachusetts in 2006 affected the entire industry in Massachusetts, correct?
Well,
it was intended to.
In a very limited way, if at all. For the 92% of people who already had insurance, nothing changed. They continued to get the insurance from their private insurance companies, and the 8%, by the way, also got private insurance. They didn't get government insurance. They got private insurance. So for the 92% of us that were already insured, nothing changed. We had hoped that what we did would help bring down the cost of health care, even in a modest way. That didn't happen. There's some who say it's come down a little bit, but or the rate of growth has come down a little bit. But in terms of getting down the cost of health care, that's the real objective that we ought to be looking at the federal level.
Governor Romney, in 2008, you campaigned in favor of the federal No Child Left Behind Act, but more recently, you've stated that the federal government should get out of education. Under a Romney administration, what role would the federal government play in setting education policy?
Well, let me say that I continue to support aspects of No Child Left Behind. I'm not looking to change that position in any way. My view is that the federal government has a role to stand up to the federal teachers' unions. The federal teachers' unions are impeding the education of our kids by preventing, in some cases, cyber learning, preventing choice in schools, preventing merit pay for the best teachers, in some cases keeping teachers that really aren't qualified, allowing them to stay in the classroom. And President Bush recognized that the only way for us to determine which schools were succeeding and which were failing, which teachers were succeeding and which were failing, was to test our kids. And the only way that could happen was for the federal government to stand up to these huge federal teachers unions that have massive resources, huge number of members. He stood up to them. I look forward to the day when we don't have to have that federal role, because education should be held at the local level. It should be managed and controlled by states, by localities, by parents and families, and not by the federal government. But the role of insisting that we're going to test our kids, which was put in place by No Child Left Behind, was an effort by President Bush to say stop to the teachers' unions.
So quickly, Governor Romney, would you support federal assistance for school lunch, Pell Grants, and GI bills?
There are a whole series of items there. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. Look, most of the programs that deal with the poor, and you mentioned Pell Grants or assistance for lunch, I look at a lot of the programs for the poor. I'm going to examine them one by one, but I think most of them, I'm going to turn the money back to the states and say you should craft the plans in the way you think best to care for your own poor. It's different being poor in Massachusetts than in Mississippi or Montana or Michigan, and let states craft their programs for Medicaid, for instance, but also potentially for housing vouchers, potentially for food stamps, even for school lunch programs.
Thank you.
Governor, in perhaps your next administration, this administration starting, there may be several appointments to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
You've said that you want to appoint strict constructionists to the bench. That's more than a label to me, and I think to us on the panel. What does that mean to you to appoint a strict constructionist to the U.S. Supreme Court?
I'd like people who recognize that their job is to protect the Constitution and to follow the Constitution as it was written and intended, and to follow laws of Congress as written and intended, rather than having the Supreme Court see its role as springing from or departing from the Constitution and laws to put in place their own views. And so I look at the opinions of the last several years by justices like Roberts and Alito, Thomas, Scalia, and I say these people are strict constructionists. I want justices that are brilliant, strict constructionists who are able to convince their colleagues that they're right on key issues, who share my values throughout, and I want to see people who have an extensive track record, either as jurists or on, if they've been for instance, the academic profession. I want to see what they've written. I want to see a real track record. I don't want to just have to take their word for being a strict constructionist. I want to see it in practice.
And Governor Romney, to change subject, as you know, there are countless illegal immigrants coming into my state in Florida. Given the federal government's complete failure to do their constitutional duty and protect my state in securing the border, what should Florida do to address this problem?
Pam, my view is that states have a responsibility to care for the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their citizens. And if the federal government is failing to fulfill its responsibility to enforce immigration laws, then states should have to take action. In my state, when I was governor, I took action. There was an effort on the part of the legislature to pass a bill providing in-state tuition to illegal immigrants. I vetoed that. There was discussion about driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. I said no way. I actually empowered our state police to work with ICE to be able to carry out federal immigration laws to make sure that we found people who were in our state illegally, that had committed crimes, and got them out of the country. I think we're going to have to recognize, however, that the federal government's going to have to step up and do its job. Secure the border, crack down on employers that don't do the job.
This question to Ken Cuccinelli for
Governor, other than overseeing historically questionable union elections, is there any reason that labor law has to be completely dominated by the federal government, or can it be eliminated effectively and turned over to the states?
You know, I think that's a fair question that I've spoken about. Actually, well, yeah, exactly. I don't mean to be insulting, but back in the days of law school and labor law classes and discussions, there's a real question: is do we need to have federal labor law? And that's where things have evolved. I think the first step we have to take is to completely revamp the National Labor Relations Board, if not eliminate it altogether, and turn back to courts or to an agency that has much shorter reins, decisions relating to labor law. But my own view is that states should be putting in place right-to-work laws to allow the people of their states to participate in the workforce without having to join a union. And federal law.
Governor, that sounds kind of like a maybe on the getting rid of.
And we have about 20 seconds left.
At this stage, Ken, I would not propose getting rid of all federal labor law, but I do see we have to rein in the power of the National Labor Relations Board and see how much we could return to the states. My preference, by the way, is wherever we can, return power and authority to the states.
And we've got to close it out at that point. Every candidate has had exactly the same amount of time. Governor Romney, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Governor Mitt Romney from Massachusetts. Governor Romney?
Thank you, Mike. This 2012 election is really going to be an election which presents a choice to the American people about what kind of America we're going to have. Historically, this has been what David Brooks has called a merit-based society, where individuals based upon their education, hard work, risk-taking, and little luck can have rewards based upon the success they achieve. That has led us to be the strongest nation in the history of the earth. It's a nation with freedom and opportunity. President Obama and his friends have a very different view for America. They want to see an entitled-based society, where you take the rewards from some and spread it out to everybody else. And where, by the way, the best rewards go to the people who do the spreading, the people in government. Are we going to be a free society with free individuals pursuing their own course with free enterprises, or are we instead going to be a nation governed by the government? I'm convinced that this is a time where America is going to have to make that choice. I've spent my life in the private sector. I know how to make this country strong and great by applying the principles that have always made us great. Thank you.